Welcome into Locked On Phillies. The Phils have named their starter for Game 1. They're going with Aaron Nola. We'll discuss the decision and a little bit of a preview of the series on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phils baseball for years over on 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio. And happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On in the World Series Phillies. Man, it never gets old to think about this being one of the last two Locked On baseball podcasts going. And it's no real thanks to me. More real thanks to you, and a lot of thanks to what the Philadelphia Phillies have been doing on the field this year. Almost completely the Philadelphia Phillies, and then maybe a small, 5% is you, the fan, and then less than 1% is me, who is just here to give you good content day in and day out on this team. It's been a fun year to do it. Not remotely done yet, though. 7 more big contests at the most, at the least 4 more big games to play. So we have the information, or some of the information, on Game 1 at least, and who will be out there on the field. We won't have a lineup until Friday afternoon, and we don't know how that's going to set up and everything. We have a general idea of the lineup. We don't know who the Astros are starting, though probably safe to guess it's going to be Verlander. We do know that Aaron Nola is going to be taking the ball for the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, here is why I totally agree with Rob Thomson's decision to start Aaron Nola. The first thing is, it's Rob Thomson. I know I've questioned some of Rob Thomson's decisions in both the championship series and the divisional series when it comes to the handling of his pitching, when it comes to the lineup, when it comes to defensive decisions or a lack of defensive decisions. All that stuff is true. And I'll continue to question Rob Thomson's decisions throughout the World Series as well, because there are some that he makes that I think are not the most prudent. Doesn't mean that they can't be right, clearly, because he's done plenty to go ahead and get the Phillies squared away and into the World Series. So I think what he's done has worked out, even the ones that I think are questionable and wouldn't necessarily have made the move. Pulling Zach Wheeler a little bit early a couple starts ago, not replacing Alec Boehm defensively in San Diego when he made that error on a tailor-made double play that could have ended Game 1. They ended up winning anyway. There have been some interesting decisions by Thomson, but ultimately, Philly Rob has been, I'm going to steal a term from Bob Cooney, who's on the John Kincaid show in the mornings on 97.5 with me. He's been managerial gold since he's taken over back in early June. I believe it was on June 3rd to be exact. So, yeah, trust in Rob Thomson. This is his decision, and he's been 99% right since taking over, and that's an incredible track record for a manager at the major league level. Now, let's talk about the reasons why I also agree with what Rob Thomson is doing, because it's not just blind faith in him. I would start Aaron Nola as well. I do agree with this decision, because the last time Aaron Nola started was October 19th. Now, when you look at it, Friday is the 28th. That means it'll be the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th. The 9th day since throwing last. So he will have had 8 days of rest. That's past the time when rest turns into rust. Do you really want to sit him a 9th day and have him throw on the 10th day? I'd rather get Aaron Nola back out there and try and keep him as close as humanly possible to the rhythm of the regular season. He's going to be plenty rested. He's going to be motivated after what was a rough start against the Padres out there in San Diego. And I think it's better to get Aaron Nola out there sooner rather than later because of that time off. I don't want him to get rusty. I don't want him to settle into the routine of not pitching. And I know he's as focused in as anybody, but that's one of the reasons I'm excited to see Aaron Nola throw. Another one, Zach Wheeler just threw on Sunday in the clinching game. So that means Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days off, regular rest, right? Well, if you remember, Zach Wheeler was on the injured list till late in the regular season. He made a couple starts, And not only were they piggyback starts with Noah Syndergaard coming out of the pen to relieve him after 3, 4, 5 innings worth of work, but it was also normally throwing on long rest, 6 days, 5 days, depending on the off days, everything like that. They did the same thing with Noah Syndergaard as well when Syndergaard was starting when he first came over here. Here's the thing with Zach Wheeler, guys. The more rest, the better he is. That's with most pitchers. Now, I think the spot, and this is just my personal opinion, my personal feel from when I threw, from talking to people who have thrown at the highest level. Heard this from Ricky Batalico a little bit when we were discussing that in conversation about the limit for a pitcher sitting in between starts. I'm not talking time frame, I'm talking days frame. So I guess that is time. But my personal opinion, where I lean based on the conversations and feel and everything like that, is that 5 days is fine. 6 days is a little too much. And this is like 4 days is normal rest. So pitching on the 5th day is normal. Pitching on the 6th day is fine. Pitching on the 7th day is a little bit, and anything after that, you start getting into rust territory. So rest is anywhere from 4 to 6 days off. That rest is 4 to 6 days off. Rust is 7 days or more, and Aaron Nola is already in that category. So I'd like to see Nola throw. And here's the other thing, and this might be a little bit of a coward's strategy, and I don't know if Rob Thomson is thinking this or not. But here's what I'll say, right? You need one game in Houston because the Phillies have been really, really good at home. They've been incredible at home. Well, what would you rather see? Zach Wheeler, who's been your best pitcher this postseason, only slightly over Aaron Nola, I might add. Don't let that one start against the Padres make you misremember how good Aaron Nola was and how he almost threw a perfect game against these same Astros earlier this season. Let's do that actually real quick before I get into that last point that I was just teasing. Aaron Nola almost threw a perfect game. He went into the 7th inning perfect against these very same Astros. And I had an argument this morning where John Kincaid had said to me, and he was talking about it on air and everything. And I said, John, why wouldn't you want to start Nola? He just took a perfect game into the 7th inning against this team less than a month ago. He's like, well, they weren't trying. Like, well, the Oakland Athletics weren't trying all year. How many perfect games did they have thrown against them? There were plenty of baseball teams. The Cincinnati Reds were trying all year. The Pittsburgh Pirates were kind of trying. They weren't that good. The Washington Nationals certainly weren't trying all year. How many times did they get perfect games? None. There were none in baseball this year. It's incredibly difficult to do whether the team's trying or not. That shows me that Aaron Nola has something that these guys don't see all that well. And Aaron Nola has the confidence, and plus that game was on the road. And it was in a clinching game, so even if the Astros weren't playing, there was interior pressure on the Phillies that wasn't given to them by the Astros, but given to them by the opportunity that they had down in Houston to have to win a game to go ahead and take advantage of clinching a playoff series, or playoff berth, rather. So that's another point in favor of Nola. But what I was getting to was, if you have to steal one game in Houston, wouldn't you rather match Zach Wheeler against Framber Valdez, who is the lesser of the two pitchers between Verlander and Valdez, than have Wheeler potentially throw like a two-hitter in game one and lose? Now, I know Aaron Nola is really good as well, and I'm not saying Aaron Nola can't beat Justin Verlander. But saving your better pitcher for game two, giving him fuller rest, getting a guy less rusty by throwing him early in Aaron Nola, or throwing him earlier than you could potentially with Aaron Nola, it just all seems to make sense for me. There's a lot of reasons why the matchups make sense, the timing makes sense, the historical numbers when you give these guys this amount of rest makes sense, the ability Aaron Nola has displayed against these Houston Astros just a couple weeks ago makes sense. Yeah, that's how I'm feeling. So I don't hate it. And that's what we're looking at for game one. So that's my defense. If you disagree, let me know. But I think it's a very prudent move by Rob Thomson, regardless of decision. And of course, we'll see how everything plays out, because there will be people with revisionist history if they lose game one and Nola gets smoked. And then you're like, well, why didn't we start Wheeler and this, that, and the other thing? So either way, the first two games, Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler are going to throw. And then later in the series, you can even flip-flop them, throw Wheeler on a short rest in game 5 or 6 if need be, how the days work out there. I got to look into it. But short rest would, I guess, be game 5. You can figure that all out. It's the postseason. You can throw them on 3 days if you need to. It's not ideal, but it's the World Series. You got to pull out all the stops. And I think the first decision Rob Thomson's making is a good one. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about just a little bit more of my preview of the series and a feel of the series. This isn't going to be statistics or numbers. We will get into a lot of that on Friday's episode. Tomorrow, we've got our highly anticipated crossover with the guys on Locked On Astros, our final crossover of the year, I believe, because, hey, who else are we going to cross over with? These final 4 games. But we're going to get into kind of a feel of the series and just my general thoughts about it. And I'll talk to you about some of the stuff I've been hearing, seeing, and discussing behind the scenes. That coming up next on Locked On Phillies. All right, I want to thank our partners at Simply Safe for sponsoring this episode. And you know I love Simply Safe if you've listened to this podcast. I'll tell you the story again because I can tell the story all day long. It was a scary moment. I live on my own. My brother, my younger brother, who's a year younger than me, lives on his own. We both live in Philadelphia. And one day, we get a call from our mom saying that somebody broke into our house in Jersey. This is our childhood home, one that we grew up in for 20 years, and one that our mom now lives in alone. And for her to call and say, hey, the house got broken into, it terrifies you. Were you there? Are you okay? What did they take? And while they didn't break in while she was there, and they did take stuff, but jewelry, nothing major, it's still it it just kills your sense of security at home. So what did we do? The immediate first thing we did before anything else, well, obviously we reported that to the police, but the first course of action that we took was to get Simply Safe, to get the full package that they offer, to go ahead and set that up, help our mom set that up. And it gives us peace of mind every single day and every single night that she's safe living at home by herself there in New Jersey, where we can't be there for her anymore. So that's, I trust my mom's life with Simply Safe. I can't say that about any other product. While they are great products, anything else that we advertise here, I can't say I trust my mom's life to it, but I do with Simply Safe. And I think you can trust them with your lives, your possessions, your family, anything that you hold dear that you have at home that you need to protect. And Simply Safe is an awesome company. You can customize the package that they put together for you. You want to go with like the high-tech cameras everywhere type of security, they have it. If you want to go with a more base, hey, doors, locks, windows, everything like that, they've got it. Everything you need with Simply Safe, it's customizable, full home package. They do everything they need to protect your home. And I want you to go ahead and go to simplysafe.com/locked on. You're going to get a big discount, 40% on your first setup with Simply Safe. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So check out my friends over at Simply Safe. Again, you go to simplysafe.com/locked on because there's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, let's jump into my feelings ahead of the series as we inch closer to the World Series. But first, I want to tell you about Locked On Sports Today. Man, you've been seeing a lot of my face on Locked On Sports Today. Go ahead and check it out. They're available wherever you get your podcasts, available on YouTube, the Odyssey app, all that good stuff. It's the biggest news from sports today. And for the past couple of days, well, that's been us here on Locked On Phillies. And, of course, our foes over on Locked On Astros. So a lot of good stuff being put out by them ahead of the World Series. And they'll have NBA stuff, NHL stuff, NFL stuff. The Eagles with a big trade today. Not big enough that they'll probably be talking about it over there, but they'll have the biggest breaking news in sports over on Locked On Sports Today. Go ahead and check out their awesome work. Now, feelings ahead of the series, because I've had a lot of people telling me to make a prediction or asking me my thoughts or how did the Phillies beat the Astros. And I've opined about it numerous times here on this podcast since the Philadelphia Phillies clinched their World Series berth for the first time since 2009. It's awesome, and I'm still trying to get my thoughts in order. So I'll tell you a little bit more of a feel about it. And you know what? I teased something in Monday's episode. 2 things that I was going to talk about throughout the week that are kind of feelings I have and ways to look at, advantages that the Philadelphia Phillies might have that might not be clearly evident. Here's the first one. We're going to go into this. The Astros are really, really consistent, right? But I started to get the feeling that consistency wasn't what's important in this series. Over 162 games, consistency is super important. That's how you win 100 plus games because day in and day out, you go out there and you put together a good effort. and you have a team that just wears other teams down and is the same team day in and day out and has the same pitchers day in and day out, and they go out and battle every time, and they win the starts they're supposed to. They even win the ones they're not supposed to because they just consistently, you know what you're getting from guys like Alvarez, Altuve, Bregman, Gurriel, Pena, Verlander, McCullers, Valdez. You know what you're getting from those guys. That's great over 162. Here's the issue. This isn't a 162 game series. If it was, no one would be betting the Phillies. But it's a 7 game series. And I think it might pay to be a little streaky. Here's some numbers that I looked up when it comes to this. So the Philadelphia Phillies, clearly the more streaky team. When they're really, really hot, they're unbelievable. For my money, the most dangerous offense in baseball when they're hot. But they'll be hot for like the month of June or July. And then for the month of August, they'll fall apart. And then September, they'll be okay. And then October, they'll stink. And then they'll get really good in the playoffs and they'll beat everybody in their path. It's weird, but it's maddening over the course of 162. But over the course of 7, well, that means that, you got a little bit more, ability to take down a team that's consistently good like the Astros. Here's what I mean. So this year, games that have been scored, so the offenses between the Houston Astros and the Philadelphia Phillies. I looked at the amount of times these teams have scored 8 runs or more in a game this year. The Houston Astros scored 8 runs or more 28 times. Sounds like a lot. Your Philadelphia Phillies, they scored 8 runs or more 32 times, 4 more times than the Astros. Doesn't seem like a big margin, but when you think about the Astros being one of the better teams in baseball across the board, to beat them in any category like that, impressive. Now let's look at as well the amount of runs scored per game. The Phillies slightly above. The Phillies had like 4.5 runs scored per game. I believe it was 4.54 exactly. And the Astros were like 4.48 or something like that, just slightly below the Phillies. Not a huge difference, but the Phillies were ahead of them in that category. And here's something that I found interesting. Last year, the Astros team that lost to the Braves in the World Series, well, they were scoring nearly 5.5 runs per game. The Phillies, they were scoring less runs per game last year than what they're scoring now. So now last year's team doesn't affect this one, but what I'm saying is this team the Houston Astros have is not the juggernaut offensive team what they've had in the past. They're really, really good, and they're consistently good. Like the Phillies, yeah, they'll have 32 games of 8 runs or more, but then they'll have 30 some games of 1 run, 0 runs, 2 runs. The Astros will have 32, as I accidentally poked myself in the eye there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just watch me literally poke myself in the left eye. That hurt. The Astros will have 28 games of 8 runs or more, but then they'll only have like, I don't know, 10 games of 1 run or less. Like they're much more consistent in the middle there. Again, good over the course of a long season, but the Phillies feel more combustible. They feel like they have the better chance to hang 10 on somebody, to really have like a heat check inning, to go out there and have a huge game to put up runs. And I know they're not going to consistently score 10 runs on the Astros, but the fact that they have the ability to do that, I mean, we just saw them do it to the San Diego Padres. That streakiness, it's part of the reason they won that Padres series. The Padres go up 4-0 on the Philadelphia Phillies at home off of Bailey Falter. If this was a team that would consistently score 4 or 5 runs a game, you're kind of feeling like, okay, well, the pitching has to be really good the rest of the way. And Houston does have good enough pitching to do that. But the point is the Phillies' combustibility, I'll call it, their hot streakness allowed them to put up 10 against the San Diego Padres and come back and win that game. To me, it just doesn't feel like the Astros quite have that next level in them of that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting there how that works out. The pitching has allowed the Houston Astros to get away with the offense being almost a run less a game more productive, or a run less a game less productive than the Astros team of 2021 that was so good. So, yeah, there's something to be feared there when it comes to the pitching. Ability to explode, not like completely implode and fall apart. I guess they have that too, and that's part of the and why some people might prefer but in a 7-game series, other than that we will discuss. We're going to do a little off the poll. We haven't done off the poll in a minute. We're going to go through, and I'm going to ask you straight up how you're feeling ahead of the World Series. I know it's early. I know we're looking at a situation where you still have to figure out how the starting works out and everything like that, and it's a 7-game series and a lot of stuff to feel out. But here's what I'll do. We're going to do off the poll coming up, and I'll discuss that question with you in just a second as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. All right. Now, if you're not familiar with Off the Poll, we haven't done it in a minute, so some of our newer subscribers may not know what it is. Off the Poll is where we ask a poll question on Twitter. You can find it at LO_Phillies. You can find it at Connor Thomas 975. That's my personal account. I always retweet it from there. And I don't tell you what my thoughts are, but I will tell you after I get the poll results what I was thinking. So you can see if you matched up with me. I can see if I matched up with the feeling of the fan base, all of that. And I'm trying to think if I want to do this as a simple, will the Phillies win the World Series, yes or no? That feels too easy. I kind of want to give a couple options. So, if the Phillies, here are your options for the series. Here's what's going to be off the poll. Astros win the series. Phillies win the series in 4. Phillies win the series in 5. Phillies win the series in 6 or more games. So they'll have to go back to Houston. Yeah, you know what? No, we're going to take the Phillies sweep out of it because I don't think anyone in their right mind is predicting a Phillies sweep of the Astros. So Astros win the series, Phillies in 5, Phillies in 6, Phillies in 7 plus, or in 7. And if you want to respond to the tweet or respond to me, comment on YouTube and say, yo, I think the Phillies are sweeping, you're crazy, go ahead and make that comment. I think you're crazy to think that. But hey, stranger things have happened, right? We didn't see him sweeping the Cardinals. We didn't see him beating the Braves in 4 games. We didn't see him beating the Padres. Well, some people saw them beating the Padres in 5 games, but once you lose game 2, it felt less likely. So who knows? But I'll put that out there at LO_Phillies at Connor Thomas 975 on Twitter. I'll get your responses, and we'll see. I've made my prediction already, but I didn't on this episode. It was on a crossover, so maybe you missed it. And when we discuss off the poll, which we will do on Friday's preview of Game 1, well, we'll get into that as well. So that's what we're talking about on Locked On Phillies. Friday, tomorrow, we have our crossover with Locked On Astros. It's going to be out a little bit later. It may even be Friday morning because they're Central Time. They don't record until about 9:30 Eastern. So it's going to be a little bit later. Bear with me, but I know we don't have a game or anything. So I'll make sure you get that out. And then Friday, we'll have our preview episode of Game 1 specifically. A lot of big stuff coming as we inch closer to the World Series. I want to thank you one more time for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. I want to remind you one more time, Locked On Sports Today, available on Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast as well, free to listen to, just like this podcast. It's a lot of World Series prep. It's a lot of my face on there, my thoughts, our foes over at Locked On Astros, preview of the series. So if you haven't gotten enough content from me, go over there and check some snippets from what we did for Locked On Sports Today. And check them out. They're doing good work. That's all my time for today. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.